All right, what is up, everybody? We are live, and we are live on my other screen now, too. All righty, just gonna give people a minute here. Okay, so what is up, everyone? I am here today with Ryan Blum, or Bloom. I actually didn't ask you beforehand. I forgot about that. From Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, and we're going to be talking about how to start, maintain, and grow an animal rights group at your university. And just to be clear at the outset, you don't need to be a student or really super outgoing to benefit from this talk, or even to support your local ASAP chapter. These chapters can totally benefit from support outside the university, and not every action you're going to be doing is some face-to-face outreach. So without further ado, Ryan, welcome, and thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having me on. I'm
Sure.
Ryan Blum.
Blum, okay.
I guess, well, you can call me whatever you want. I guess Blum's technically the correct, but really excited to be on here and share some of my thoughts and experiences, and also learn from people interacting as well.
Yeah, same, man. Really, really excited to have you here. So I guess the first thing, just can you start by telling us what Allied Scholars for Animal Protection is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Allied Scholars for Animal Protection, or ASAP for short, the acronym, it's a new brand of animal advocacy that focuses on unifying animal rights activism in universities specifically in order to foster systemic change. And our goal is to make vegan organizations on college campuses to be always active and to be effective and to be unified, always sharing information, sharing strategies, tactics to grow quicker and circle and to make the vegan movement actually make sure it actually happens, get some stuff done to make future leaders in the space. And this sort of thing at this level of sort of organization hasn't really quite been done before, or at least of recent in college campuses. Yeah.
Nice. And so I guess how did you hear about it, and what made you want to start specifically an ASAP chapter?
Yeah. I was following Dr. Faraz Harsini, the person who started this whole ASAP thing, on social media for a little bit. And then he had some random Instagram story go up about the importance of going into careers to help animals, so whatever your interests are, do something for a career for it. And I just swiped up on the story. I was like, yeah, I agree or something. And I never talked to Faraz before. And then we just started talking after that. And there was so much to talk about. I asked him to have a Zoom call, just learn more about each other and what he's doing. And he told me about ASAP. And I told him, I was just finishing freshman year of college at UW-Madison in Wisconsin. Mm-hmm. And it seemed like exactly what I wanted to do at my university. I was already involved a little bit with some animal advocacy organizations on campus, but they weren't quite like ASAP. And I'll get into maybe a bit later the differences between the ones I was already involved with and how ASAP is really bettered the whole entire dialogue and space for animal advocacy there. One cool thing about ASAP is, unlike other already existing animal advocacy groups on college campuses, they have an external team that's not just made up of students. There's paid staff. There's people like Dr. Faraz Harsini who will actually travel to the universities. So when students are busy or there's a dip in momentum, there's finals, whatever it is, they actually travel to the universities so that they don't lose momentum. The chapters don't die off, especially when the students graduate who are leading those organizations and they get unlucky and no new ones come. So that really speaks to me, because with the animal advocacy organizations that I was involved with, even just for 2 semesters, our spring semester was really poor. And there was a serious concern that we wouldn't have the traction to pick up again in the fall. And having ASAP there to come in made it so that we could really keep going. And this happens at school after school after school.
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing to talk about, that the actual sustainability, because every time like you see this too in corporations, when one corporation buys another corporation and lays off a bunch of people, you just lose this huge chunk of embodied knowledge about the organization that's really hard to get back. And when you hire new people, you have to teach them all over again. And so I imagine a similar thing is going to happen if you have the ASAP chapter. It dips into nothing and then is restarted from whole cloth again. You're just going to lose so much from an efficiency and knowledge perspective. So I think that's really awesome. I think that's good that that's a key focus of ASAP. I'm also happy that you said, and I've been trying to bring this point home, that this live stream is not only for students. There are, if you're outside the community or outside the university, you can still help. And like you said, even professors and teachers and things like that are going to be able to get involved and help smooth out those bumps. So just very important for everyone to know, if you're watching this and you're not a student, think about the local universities in your area. You could maybe help a student there start an ASAP chapter, or there might be an ASAP chapter there already that you could go and volunteer with. So again, yeah, if you're not a student, still relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. There's just a lot of ways to get involved, because the industries, the culture of animal exploitation are so huge and so massive that they encompass so many different aspects of our lives that we need all hands on deck from everyone who can. So that includes people not students or even in universities at all. There's lots of other ways to support, and we'll get into that for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So like, what was the animal rights scene like at UW-Madison? Like, what year are you? I wasn't quite sure.
I'm going into my junior year now, so I just finished my sophomore year. So I've had 4 semesters, and I've got 4 more to go in undergrad.
Okay. And then are you going to be leaving UW-Madison at that point?
Yeah, likely. I don't know if I'll stick in Madison or if I'll be back in Detroit, where I am currently for the summer. That's just where I grew up. Or if I'll be in DC. I don't know where I'll be personally. But I don't have graduate school plans currently, no.
Okay. So it is definitely then important for you to set up that sustainable chapter there and have someone else be like, are you like leading the chapter? Are there leaders at these things, or how's that work?
What ASAP's done, and again, they've only had 2 fully active semesters outside of the original starting universities in Texas, which was just even a semester before that. So still, year and a half in of being really active. And so they've have like chapter leads at each of the schools. So you can call them like presidents of the chapter, which are the students there. So they help, mainly do the heavy bulk of the organizing and the logistics and leading the group. And as ASAP grows, there are more of those chapter leaders. One still per school. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So you would like kind of appoint someone afterwards who's like your successor, basically. Okay. Yeah, that's awesome. So I guess like what I want to talk about here, I think that would probably be valuable because I did get messages from students about how to actually start the chapter, is kind of more about like, that was like the 30,000 foot view that you gave us, but like, what are the nuts and bolts, like the day to day, like you wake up and you got to do some ASAP stuff. Like, what are you doing on the day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. To answer that question, I want to go back a tiny bit in history to what was going on in Madison before ASAP and how that transformed like what I was doing on a day-to-day basis now. There was already a really healthy presence in the effective altruism movement, or EA. Some people watching this may have heard of that. If you haven't, their organization, it's really big international organization, founded around 8 years ago, actually probably 10 years ago at this point. And their goal is to, how can we help the world and reduce the amount of suffering? Generally, it was founded from like a utilitarian perspective. How can we reduce the most suffering? And then how can we effectively make models and actually make that change? So they're not specific to any issue. They just follow their models and evidence to where the issue goes to. So just how it happens, because the food system hurts animals so much, that is a main cause that effective altruism often puts themselves into. So there's an existing EA group, and that was the closest thing there was to animal advocacy on campus.
Interesting.
They talked about animal advocacy sort of from like a utilitarian or welfare perspective, had some educational programs on it, had some guest speakers. And then there was actually the semester I got there, a few weeks in the semester, people in that EA community who were particularly interested in animals started their own sister group called Animal Advocacy, which was basically EA just for animals. So I joined leadership for that after a semester, and then was president of that for a semester as well, up until I founded ASAP. So the things I was doing day to day for that included running what we called a fellowship program, which was a 6 to 8 week course where each week was a different topic related to some aspect of animal advocacy. The first week would be, why animals matter morally in our circle of compassion, careers that you can go in to help animals, what does the law side look like for animals? We talked about different areas in animal advocacy, such as, climate change and other things that are externalities that happen when we abuse animals on a large scale. So I found that really good. We only had a couple students, even at this 40,000 or so person university, take these fellowships at a time. So I helped facilitate one, and I also took it in the fall as well. I was already vegan, already interested in animals, but I wanted to sort of see how that was so I could know, how can I change this for the better later.
Yeah.
So then when I started ASAP, there was a lot more collaboration with other schools and with Dr. Faraz Harsini and others in the ASAP space. Instead of just my small group of Madison students, I was now collaborating with a bunch of people. So that was really cool. So what this looks like on a day-to-day basis now, like I can even just walk you through today. It's 7 p.m. for me here.
Awesome.
I'm not on campus right now. I'm currently interning for a political office, but that's 3 days a week. So on one of my off days, I just started working on the very beginning draft for a blog post about careers that vegans could go into in the FDA, the USDA, the EPA, things like that. I was helping design some new posters for ASAP, some ideas, things like that. So using the free time that I do have to get that stuff done. What it looks like on campus is a little bit different. It's all about mobilizing people. If I get a new dedicated person to do ASAP work, that like is the best possible thing. I notice like 1 or 2 super dedicated people can get a lot more done long term than a couple people, than a much more greater group of people, which are sort of floating in and out of maybe I'll help with this or I'll come to this, versus who aren't super dedicated, which is okay. You're going to have those people and a lot of them. But it's really a gem when you find people who really want to use their voice. So ASAP itself does 3 big things on campuses. They do regular outreach, so where you can't miss the vegan message. This includes postering, tabling, finding other vegans with a big sign that say vegan, grab a cookie. We'll do outreach like cubes, like AV style. We'll do dog meat when the tours come, dog meat. We'll do other things like that. We'll host debates, things like that. Then the second thing we do, so there's outreach. The second thing we do is want the dining halls to go more plant-based and have better plant-based options. This does 2 things. One, it obviously reduces the demand for animal products, so more animals are saved, but also makes it easier for new vegans and vegans to be on their campus and thrive on their campus. And then the third thing is regular education. So we bring in guest speakers to talk about a bunch of different aspects of the food system, as well as other issues that affect animals like animal testing, and to talk about their expertise and their experience. So we brought in Dr. Crystal Heath online to talk about her experience in the veterinary world for helping animals. We had Madeline Krasno, a former primate lab worker at UW-Madison, a former student at UW-Madison who worked in the primate lab, and talked about her experience. So super courageous. She's outspoken about that. That was amazing. We got a lot to talk about that on campus. We'll bring in people like Dr. Faraz Harsini to talk about his experience starting ASAP and leadership in the movement. We'll have people talk about alternative proteins, the environment stuff, and then, of course, the most important thing, the ethics for the animals. So those 3 things in conjunction, the guest speakers, like education, the plant-based dining halls, and then the outreach, create a positive feedback loop, and they actually work together to create that change. Yeah.
100%. I think too, the dining hall thing actually provides, I think, another advantage, which I noticed while I was on tour, which is that it actually provides you with a bit of a rhetorical advantage, because many people will say something like, oh, I don't think individual change matters. I think we need to fix systems. And having that in your back pocket with like, oh yeah, well, we also want a systemic change here too. Yeah. You know what I mean? Having that to be able to say, I think is really good. I don't know if you guys do this, but I think it would be cool if you actually had like a petition right there.
Yeah.
Or plant-based. And so when someone says that, you can be like, yeah, and so we also do systemic. So if you want to sign that petition, since you just said you're concerned with systemic change, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
You know, and so you could probably, I don't know, garner some signatures that way. But I do think there's a nice rhetorical advantage to that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. If I can insert real quick,
yeah, sure.
This is why I think it's so important that I have more people to do more of these projects. When I have my intro event this September at school, what I want to do is have this presentation about what ASAP does and the moral urgency of all this. And I want to break out into sort of meeting rooms, just tables with a note card, and say, do you people, who here wants to do outreach? Everybody raises their hands. They go to that table. Who here wants to work in the plant-based dining hall campaign? But I need people to actually do this, get the signature set up, all the different logistical things that make this happen. I need people on the ground to make that happen. Yeah.
Yes. And that's what I was kind of alluding to earlier too, with you don't have to be outgoing. Like obviously to do outreach, you got to be a little outgoing, or you got to train yourself to come out of your shell. But like for something like the plant-based dining hall, there's a lot of like bureaucratic stuff I imagine that you can do that doesn't involve like getting out in the middle of, the university square and saying like, do you want some dog meat?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would encourage people who want to hear about plant-based dining hall campaigns in schools in the U.S. to check out what ASAP Columbia is doing, and existing organizations at Columbia, Animal Advocacy Organization in Columbia, on their plant-based campaigns.
Right.
Be totally transparent. At Madison, we haven't really focused a lot on that because we made the conscious decision starting a few semesters ago that the options for plant-based are already pretty decent there. So we'd rather focus on the more neglected areas like the outreach and the education. But we'll probably get to it as soon as we can, when we have the manpower available. Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, and I'm actually going to reach out. I think I have the email drafted to Plant-Based University, the campaign that's in Europe, and I plan on actually having them on here soon. I think that Faraz may have said that you may partner with them at some point. ASAP may partner with the Plant-Based University. So
perhaps, yeah,
really cool.
yeah, that would be really cool. Yeah,
absolutely. That'd be great. So that's good. Okay, so like we've covered that, you don't need to be a student. We've covered that you don't need to be outgoing. So I like all that. What about the actual bureaucracy of starting the ASAP chapter? Because I assume you can't just say, we have an ASAP chapter now, and then go just set up a table and write ASAP on it. There has to be some interface with the actual administration at the school, I imagine. What does that look like?
Yeah. So the culture of ASAP, what we want to do is, because this is such a moral urgency, every day it takes for animal agriculture to end is billions more animals dying if you include marine life. So we definitely want to move quickly. So part of that culture is, although we're a nonprofit and sometimes nonprofits are slow and bureaucratic, we want speed. We want things to happen quickly. We want momentum. We want to get things going. So because of that, the first thing you do when you want to start an ASAP chapter is actually reach out to ASAP so we can lend our support. We'll talk to you, figure out what you guys need. Do you have an already existing animal advocacy organization on your campus like mine? And now do you want to have 2 animal advocacy groups like there is on my campus? We actually have 3 or 4 now if you count all the different stuff with, stuff specific for dogs and whatever. Or do you want to transition your old animal advocacy group to an ASAP chapter for whatever reason? Or do you not have anything at all? Like at Ohio State, they had nothing, and now they have an ASAP chapter. So you need to figure that out. We would talk to you through that. Dr. Frost would get on you with a call and all that. Then once we decided, hey, we're going to do this ASAP thing, we need to figure out how you can actually do that on your campus. So there's student organizations on campus or clubs. They all are called a little bit different thing depending on the university. So you want to check with your university what it takes to actually be a registered student organization. Typically, that comes with advantages. So you book rooms to participate in student org fair, get access to be able to have mass emails once a semester, get a faculty advisor. There are advantages typically for most universities to being a registered student organization, as opposed to saying, I'm ASAP Michigan State, but the university, you have no actual affiliation with them other than calling yourself that on a sign.
Right. Yeah.
So that process is totally different and unique to each university. So I would check in with your university's rules. But one good thing is universities are often slow to get back. They might have a 18 or 19-year-old intern working the email, and they might not know what they're doing, or it's slow or whatever. So I actually suggest calling them and actually making a relationship with them. Make a relationship at UW-Madison. We have our Center for Leadership and Involvement. Make sure they know who you are, what you're about. And that way, they know you by name. They can help you get things done, that sort of thing. The process often takes a long time. Like at UW-Madison, it can take up to multiple months to register a student organization. So if it's June and you want to start this thing by September, it's like sort of like a wake-up call. It sort of hits you. So and some universities are worse and some are better. So you definitely want to sort of read up on your school's website or whatever, or talk to people about how it works at your school. And then additionally, sometimes schools will require like a constitution or whatever for your organization. Any long logistical thing when students are busy, ASAP can also help you get your chapter started for all things it can. So some things have to be done by the students, like signatures and stuff. But anywhere ASAP can help, we're absolutely love to help. That's what we're here for, getting the set up. Yeah,
that's awesome. So they can actually help with some of even the bureaucratic stuff. That doesn't have to just be on the full shoulders of the student.
It can. Again, it'll depend on the school. So like at Madison, there's a rule that like to be an actual leader of the student organization, you have to be like an active student and have all these requirements. Like, you can't be failing your classes, like all these different things. And to set the student organization up, you have to be in a certain level of standing. So things like that will only apply to students. But if you needed, paperwork help or something like that, or even just answering questions about logistical things like who provides your money for your organization? How do you guys buy food? You need a university bank account. Can it just be paid through for ASAP? How does it work?
Yeah. It's good to know. That's actually really good to know because we're looking to try to start some ASAP chapters in the area that I'm in North Carolina. And knowing that, like, depending on the school, there may be like a several month process to even get that chapter like going is definitely unfortunate, but good to know. So I'm glad we had this conversation, if nothing else than for just that.
And I know it's not the end of the world if you like don't become a registered student org, but like you've got people ready to do ASAP and all these different things. Like, for a different club, I'm involved with the Alt Protein Project for the Good Food Institute. We didn't get our student org registered until October, but we were doing stuff in September. We just it wasn't ideal, but we still did stuff. We still outreached, we were still on the street on campus doing our thing, even though we were sort of late to registration. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
so it's not the end.
Yeah, there's definitely a sort of ask forgiveness, not permission thing, because most of the time you're probably not going to get dinged on whatever it is that you're doing, I assume.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So then, okay, so we talked about kind of the strategies at ASAP of like, we have the education, we have the outreach, like the talks and things like that. We have the plant-based food hall. But I imagine you also have like a growth strategy, right? Like how do we attract not just like how do we make non-vegans vegans, but the vegans that are here, how do we get them activated?
Yeah.
So what sort of like walk me through those like strategies, I guess, and plans?
Yeah, I think to simplify our growth strategy as much as possible before I get into the detail is we're using a positive feedback loop. So I mentioned that term once before, and I'm going to sort of explain it again, where we've got all the different stuff, all angles of attack to get the vegan message from all people who would be interested for all these different reasons. So we've got the guest speakers talking about a bunch of different things. And then we've got the outreach and a bunch of different methods, and they actually work hand in hand. For example, I was hanging up dog meat posters in the walls of the philosophy building on campus when dog meat was going on. And a few days after that happened, I was also doing a cube, and I was out in the street. And I was having a conversation. This particular person wasn't very receptive. They weren't really getting it. They were sort of pushing back. They were sort of deflecting certain things. And I was showing them the footage of what was going on the screen. And then at some point, randomly in the conversation, they said, "Oh, wait, I saw this dog meat poster." And I was so pissed. I was so upset. She said she like couldn't even focus in her next class. She was so upset. Wow. And then I told her, think of these victims you're seeing here in the screen. I think it was chickens was on the screen. Think of every single one of those as the dogs that you know and love. And that just hit. She got it right then and there. It was a very emotional and profound conversation for her and made a big impact. And she declared she wanted to go vegan right there on the spot. And this sort of thing happens a lot. So that was an example of different forms of outreach actually working hand in hand. And I don't think this sort of thing would work for everyone, but it worked for her. For example, myself, I didn't grow up with any companion animals or pets or whatever. And I don't think I was particularly, wouldn't be that much even more saddened between seeing a pig get in pain versus a dog. So maybe that wouldn't have worked on me, but it worked on this person. So I thought that was really cool. Yeah.
Yeah, certainly. You need like a multitude of strategies because every human is different. We're the same in a lot of ways, but we bring different like baggage to the table. And so different things are just going to hit differently.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say in terms of like gaining traction for vegans, there's about 40,000 people on UW-Madison's campus, a mix of undergraduate and graduate students, also some other people who live in the city. And if only 1% of those people are vegan, it's probably more higher plant-based, and then, around 1% are probably vegan, like really for the animals ethically. That's 400 students. My organizations have like, maybe 50, 60 on our email list, and then like half a dozen really active people who want to get stuff done. Like where is everyone? So you have to go out and actually find them. And when you have these outreach things going on, we'll run into, typically if we run a cube for about every 2 hours of doing a cube at the most busy best part of campus, we'll typically run into like one vegan That's typically not the average we go to, or vegan that will at least come up to us and say that they're vegan and thank us for what they're doing or whatever. So that's been really cool to see. And we've had my new friend Yurong. He's a graduate student who is from China, and he's doing law, getting a law degree at the graduate school there. And he came across us. He went vegan just a few weeks before us. And he even saw the vegan grab a cookie sign a couple weeks before, and we had a good conversation. And now he's going to be doing cubes this summer while I'm not even there in Madison. He's just doing cubes this summer with the people already there.
Nice.
So that's really cool to see. So we want to find vegans who are already there on campus. We do that through the vegan grab a cookie. We do that through targeted emails. There's dorms that are more likely to have vegans, such as the sustainability dorm, like Greenhouse, where I lived freshman year. There's actually like a greenhouse on top of the dorm. It's pretty cool.
Okay.
Climate friendly people there. So like that dorm was like probably a quarter vegetarians and like 10% vegans or whatever. Like it was, and I met a bunch of other vegans there. And then also even just like being brave, and like you see if you're a new freshman, you're looking to make friends, you see somebody at the dining hall eating, seitan or something, like more often they're not, they're, probably animal friendly. So you go up, talk to them, start a conversation, look for vegans everywhere because you want to find them and get them involved. I think a lot of time people feel socially isolated at school. They are young, they feel peer pressure, other things from veganism, even, to drink and other things like that. So having vegan friends, getting to know people who support you and have similar values to you, I think is definitely really comforting.
Yeah, that's when you said someone eating seitan at your dining hall, that's just like fucking wild to me. Because like I try to remember when I was in college, the idea that seitan would be like literally anywhere on campus is just absolutely ludicrous. So just the fact that like seitan is there, like they're there, those sorts of vegan options at your dining hall is just like, that's amazing to me.
Yeah. And even one of the dining halls is like, it's one of the smaller dining halls. It's actually in a dorm. And that same friend, Yurong, that I had met, he worked in the dining hall, and actually one of the chefs there is vegan. And it just so happens that that dining hall has like always by default, like the food's like 50% vegan, a lot of ethnic food, and it's really good. It's it's not a vegan dining hall by any stretch of the imagination, but it's has much better and more consistent available options. And just because somebody happens to be working there who is vegan, which is cool.
Yeah, 50% vegan friendly options that's totally wild to me. That I can't even like fathom that. So that's great. Yeah. I mean, there's already progress being made. That's amazing. I love to hear that. When we're talking about like retention and getting, because you said like, let's say we have 400 vegans, and we have this sort of like funnel, right? We have 400 vegans, 60 of them maybe are on your listserv, and then maybe like 15 of them come to your things. Do you think there's any benefit to having more cupcakey vegan events, like having vegan potlucks or a vegan movie night, things like that? Do you feel like that distracts from the core message, or do you think there's a place for that to help sort of build momentum and foster like social relationships and things?
Yeah, I think it's a total balance. So I think one thing that you definitely don't want to do is have it like you're only doing events for vegans and for the vegan community that have nothing to do with advocating for animals and things like that. That said, if you're advocating for animals on a consistent basis, I think it can be really good. It can have community building. There's one thing I've learned, and it's a little cliche to say, but like, although our work is for the animals, it's all about the people. So networking in terms of developing trusting bonds with these people who you're going to be out on the street with doing these courageous things on campus. You definitely want to have a good bond. So having that community feel is definitely really great. I have the one small problem there was this particular semester was some of the events we had scheduled for the fall got pushed back to the spring. So we had a bunch of events for the spring. We were really oversaturated with speakers. We had like 1 to 2 speakers, some event every week. But all the people in our sort of big group chats were a little sort of burnt out and wanted to come to like just the social event sort of things. And you want to avoid that. So it's a bit of a balance. So I had to sort of know for next time, sort of balance things more and definitely get people involved. People really like coming to events where there's vegan food or visiting animal sanctuaries, which is all great. But for me, the gold mine is getting people active, but it's definitely a balance between the two.
Yeah, for sure. I can see that. I can see like it's because it's much easier to slide into like do we really need to do a cube this week? Let's just do another potluck. Let's just like hang out. I can definitely see that, because the activism is hard. It's like, it's harder than other stuff to get out there. So
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah.
One small clarification I'll also make is the problem I just mentioned where you're like oversaturated with events might have been a little bit unique to my university, because we have so many other organizations like the Animal Advocacy Group, the Effective Altruism Group, the Dane for Dogs Group, and there's the Ridgeland trial with the dogs, and DXE came. There's a bunch of stuff going on that might not always happen if your school just has like one ASAP chapter and none of the other conjunctions of organizations.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, your school sounds like it really is like a lot of like animal and environmentally friendly forward organizations. Again, this is probably just me showing my age, but like when I was in school, I just do not remember that being like a very prominent thing at all. So that's awesome.
I mean, yeah, it's decent, but it's also, huge. There's over 1,000 student organizations. So although there might be 5, 6 or something that are into this sort of stuff.
Okay.
It's also a huge animal agriculture school. When I was at the end of senior year of high school and I was picking what school to go to, I like made the conscious choice to go to this big animal agriculture school. It's like the dairy state, everything, because I knew I could have a high impact there.
Oh, wow. In high school, you were deciding like you were like employing an effective altruist like framework to, that is wild. So like at what age did you run into effective altruism and you were like, yeah, I'm very convinced by this like philosophical framework?
Yeah, I went vegan at 15, right at the end of sophomore year of high school, right when COVID happened, the spring 2020. And I did some online activism from like anonymous vegan accounts on Instagram that was just like straight graphic footage, that sort of thing. But didn't really get involved in, we've all been there. Didn't really get involved to anything in person in college. And I hadn't heard of effective altruism until college. So I guess I just wanted to sort of make a high impact, but it wasn't really through an effective altruism lens yet, because I didn't learn about that until freshman year. Yeah.
Interesting. That's like really inspiring to me to hear that you were like not only a vegan at that age, but also thinking so strategically. Because I think it's like a lot of like, even very few people I feel like go vegan that young, but even if they do, it's not like you're immediately in this like strategic, systemic sort of mindset. So I feel like that must be really unique. That's very cool to hear. Yeah,
this will be a vulnerable moment for me on the internet, but it was winter of junior year. So I was vegan for about a year. And I remember I was just like up in my room doing homework, and I was sort of interested at the time in either doing something international relations, or I was also really interested in robotics in high school. It's like, maybe this is what I'll go into. I was thinking about, playing to James Madison School at MSU for international relations. I was super into Model UN. And I was just like, and it was some Joey Carbstrong video. I was already vegan, already super interested in it, but I was some Joey Carbstrong video of him going to a slaughterhouse, and like, you just see these pigs get just like sawed in half right after seeing them alive. And that just like, especially was like really hit me in the gut. And I was like, what am I doing with my career, with my life? I need to be like an activist. Like that's what I need to do. This is like what it's going to be. And I don't know how to do it. I don't know what that's like. How do I make any money? How do I support myself? And the activists I'm familiar with were people like Gary Yourofsky or Earthling Ed. And it didn't seem like they had like a career, more as just like they were just activists.
Yeah.
And like my parents are not vegan. My family's not vegan, but they are very, very, very supportive of me. And, but I was at the same time, I was like, I can't, I went to a college prep school for high school. My parents really invested in my education. And I felt like, am I going through all this and going to school and all this just to, make future YouTube videos about animal rights or, social media and all these things, when they equipped me to, get some job that took all this education. Now looking back, I realize you can be an activist and doing all these so many different things. One, there's nothing wrong with being an influencer by any means, and I think we need as much of that as possible. And at the same time, I can go into careers like politics. I can go into government roles. I can help lead alternative protein corporations and all these different things while being an activist and and doing those things as activism. And that was a really comforting thing to click early college. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. So is that what you want to do? Do you want to get into alt protein or politics, or do you have a preference?
Yeah, I think in the last 9 months or so, I got pushed more into politics and policy is I think where I want to go. I've been interning in a political office for a congresswoman here in Michigan this summer. And I think that's definitely an area where we can make change. If we have a bunch of staffer positions, you don't even have to be the congressman or the senator or the president or whatever, having the staffers of those positions, the chief of staff, the legislative director, all these focusing on animal issues, or even just being ready to vote, saying if there's ever a vote on something animal issue in the future, you know what my vote's going to be, and having that on both the Republican and Democrat side as much as possible so things can actually pass is so neglected, and I think super, super important.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that kind of mirrors like what we were talking about with ASAP. Like you don't have to be the figurehead. You can be the person in the back doing, the other very important work. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And ASAP's, big goal for systemic change is to get these young college students who are young, open-minded, to get them to actually go into these careers, whatever they are. For everyone watching, like whatever you're good at, whatever skills you have, do something and speak up. Whether it's your livelihood or on the side. And I think we have a responsibility not only to the animals, but also ourselves to make that happen. Because as much as we want to think that, history keeps progressing and a vegan world is inevitable however long, the truth is it's only that way if we make it happen. And we need to do that.
True. Yeah. It doesn't just happen on its own. It happens because of like the sweat and tears and hard work of individuals. And it doesn't take a huge group of individuals to make big societal change. I think that's something that people also need to keep in mind. It's not like you need 50% of people working towards a cause to have that cause go off. So yeah, I think it's a really good point. So I do want to ask you maybe a little tougher questions. Whenever you started, was there anything that you thought was going to be really hard about this process that turned out to be like much easier than you thought?
I didn't know if you're gonna go those hard about this process. That's still hard, or if it's gonna be easier. An area that I perhaps found was going to be difficult is when you're a very active animal rights activist, vegan on campus. How are people going to treat you, affect you? What's the relationship's going to be like with your fellow students, your roommates, your teachers, your professors, especially on a smaller campus. Even on a big campus, everything's very community. If you're doing a cube, no matter how that conversation goes, you have to be able to be prepared to do a group project with that person the next day. So I was a little concerned, like what reputations is going to leave me and all this stuff. And I would say you don't have to compromise on any of your values, on your mission or anything, but it goes into the details and how you convey that, even the littlest thing in terms of the tone. So if somebody asks you a question about your values and you feel you're outnumbered in this conversation and you think your idea is going to be unpopular, you can still say it, but just the way you say it and the way you're able to relate yourself to them, even if you disagree with them, relating yourself to them and being like, we're in this together, I think can be definitely important. That's actually something your videos have also helped and taught me as well a little bit in terms of your outreach on the street. You seem really, really good at connecting with people and relating to them, being like, if you're showing them footage and you're not very receptive, but you can tell it's like hitting them, be like, I felt guilty and I felt bad when I first saw this too. I was just like you, but I understood my action had this consequence and we have to move forward. That was one thing that has been easier going on in terms of it hasn't really, I think, affected me too much. Maybe it's just me getting older and things like that. But I can still have good relationships with professors and all these different things, even when I challenge them about something about animal agriculture in class and things like that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think like disagreeing well can often bring you closer to a person than like agreeing poorly, or agreeing with them in a shallow way. Oftentimes it's those conflicts that are handled well that really forge those strong relationships. And I can tell you as like from being in a romantic relationship for like over a decade, that like took me quite a long time to learn. Is that really hammering out those difficult conversations in a really healthy way can be surprisingly therapeutic in a way that I think a lot of people really underestimate. And so instead of like leaning into the difficulty, they lean out of it or they lean away from it, and it ends up causing much more long-term problems. And so I think the same thing just applies, in any sort of social situation, and particularly in activism when you're in a small community like a campus. Yeah. So that's awesome. That's really good to hear. It's really good to hear.
And even like during a cube, I remember one time, one of the bystanders after the conversation, they're like, "Can you have non-vegan friends?" Like they didn't say non-vegans, but like you have like just like meat-eating friends. And I was like, yeah, I absolutely can. I mean, some of my best friends are still not vegan, all these different things, and my family's not vegan. And they're like, sort of, how do you navigate that? And, one, I, philosophically don't believe in terms of sort of my understanding of the science too much and to what degrees of free will we have. And that's maybe a spicy topic or all these different things. So to me, it's about like, how can I change these people for the better rather than, pure malice or whatever. And then second, it was, I have people like in my family who are apathetic to the plight of animals, but admit that, what we do to animals is wrong, it's immoral, and I'm being hypocrite and against my own morals for doing this. So although I despise their apathy, I appreciate their honesty. And this also happened in conversations and cubes too, where somebody says, yeah, I get it. You're totally right. I'm too lazy to switch. What do you want from me? And so I say, I despise the apathy because it has a victim, and I point to the screen, but I appreciate the honesty. And if anything, we need more honesty in this world. Here's how we can actually make this tangible for you.
I think those people are good targets too for systemic change. That's one reason why, like, when I do outreach, I would like to now start having some sort of like petition to sign, so that if they do say I'm lazy, I'll put the pressure on. I'll be like, I think individual change matters. You should change. But also, like, if you really agree with this and it's just like a matter of your willpower, like sign this petition, vote for, policies like this, or at least don't vote against them, whenever these sorts of things come up. So yeah, I think that's definitely important. I guess then the other question, sort of the mirror of that question, what did you think would be easy that ended up being difficult?
Yeah. I want to give a thoughtful answer, so I'm going to think about it for a second.
Sure.
Time spent doing all the unsexy things. So anytime when you're doing an outreach, you're posting all these different stuff, half, most, whatever amount of your time is spent riding the bus there, is spent dealing with weather, is spent, oh shoot, this footage was deleted, was emailing people, was talking to people to motivate them to do this. It's all these little logistical things that aren't the most exciting, aren't the most fun thing. I love talking to people about the streets during cubes, but if I did a heat map of where my actual time in terms of helping ASAP, it's only like a tiny little fraction. And you just have to sort of roll with the punches and sort of deal with that. And sometimes you'll have slow nights. There was a day back in February, I was doing the vegan grab a cookie outreach, and like I talked to like no one that night. And I was just like, but that's okay, because I've had other days where it's a great success, and you just have to deal with that. And it can be really helpful to have a group of people, have a community on campus, other vegans, and people you're with your friends with, to sort of talk about those experiences. Because it's not all sunshines and rainbows all the time. Yeah.
No, definitely not. Yeah, I mean, this is a realization I came to as well, both with doing outreach and also like the YouTube channel. Like, obviously, like putting out the video is fun, talking to people like these interviews, this is fun. Going out on the street, while it does make you nervous, it is also like fun and like invigorating. But yeah, the soul crushing stuff really, for me at least, and I know some people don't mind it, is the bureaucratic stuff. All the back end stuff, trying to like, in this instance, figure out how to like make a thumbnail, make a title, these sorts of things, make sure everything, the sound quality is good and blah, blah, blah. It's just like, that's the stuff that can definitely wear you down. And I think that's another reason why having, doing outreach and doing animal rights work with groups is so good, because some people really enjoy that and some people really don't. Some people really do not want to get out in front of people and chat, and others do. And so like understanding that division of labor is really important. Because I mean, that's how society works in general, right? Like we're just kind of making like a tiny little society of activists. So I think that's important to realize, because I think a lot of people feel like they can't do activism, or like it's not right for them, because they always view activism as the most, like the brightest, shiniest thing they see on Instagram or on YouTube or whatever. And so I think it's good. I just want to keep underscoring this over and over again. There are things that are not just you face to face with someone who's screaming at you about like, where do you get your protein,
Yeah. And one thing also that I think that I thought was going to be hard, which is hard, is sort of dealing with sort of infighting within the vegan and animal advocacy movement. And I think, some of that's going to be inevitable. Vegans are not a monolith. There are already people who are making a change, who are caring. So they're going to be very opinionated and all these things, which is great. There's going to be differences in who gets funding for organizations. There's going to be ideological difference between people who are more concerned with animal suffering versus animal freedom, like abolitionism versus welfarism. There's going to be differences in how we interpret statistics in terms of what things are effective. There's going to be that. So being able to, there are red lines, obviously, in terms of people you can't work with. But I think if we can pull together as much as possible and put aside our sort of smaller differences, even ones that don't have to do with veganism, political things, human political things, I think is important. Being able to work with people who you disagree with, who would even advocate against in another context, but still working together towards veganism, I think is not only helpful, but if we can't do that, we won't win. It won't be possible. We have to do that. If I counted the people on my fingers who agreed with me on every vegan position, heck, even all other political positions, I would be twiddling my thumbs on a few people on Twitter. So,
I genuinely don't think, I think I might not be able to find a single person who would agree with me on every single one of my vegan related positions, I would say, like if we really got into like the weeds with it. But I think you did point out something really important there. And that's another thing that the internet does, which is like magnify our differences in a way that like when you're in the real world, it just doesn't seem to happen so much. If you're online, if you're on YouTube or Instagram or whatever, I'm sure you've seen a lot of infighting recently with veganism, and it's always there. It's always like waxes and wanes. But like when I went to hang out with, they're just very recently, I joined a local animal rights group in my area. And I also had a similar anxiety. I'm like, oh man, I'm probably not going to totally agree ideologically, even on veganism, with all these people. And it's like, you get together with the people and you're like, oh yeah, that's right. I can like hang out with people and not just like straight up argue with them over the minutia of everything, And that doesn't tend to be how people interact in like a face-to-face real world situation when everyone's like trying to do a campaign for something or even having dinner afterwards. It's just like tends not to be how people interact. Yeah. And you can forget that from being on the internet so much. And so if people are watching me here, obviously you probably are on social media more than the average person maybe. And so you may be exposed to a lot of this infighting that just to me, at least with my experience, has not been reflected in the real world. Not that people never disagree or there's no infighting, but the volume is turned down significantly compared to what you would expect it to be if you're taking social media as your sample. So I think that's like really, really important to point out. So I think you did talk about handling conflict a little bit. Maybe a harder question here is like, have you grown skeptical or cynical about any of the aims you initially had? Either just you as a vegan, as an activist, maybe specifically with ASAP. Is there anything that you have like begun to become skeptical of?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say the sort of curve of how quickly my vegan beliefs changed happened very much in high school. So like, and sort of falling victim a little bit to the Dunning-Kruger effect of like, what are the best arguments and all these different things. And then it's sort of now little things here and there will change my views, but it sort of takes a bigger hit and more evidence, that sort of thing. So it's sort of remained relatively flat in terms of vegan ethics and views. How I go about those in terms of interacting with people obviously has definitely changed as I actually interact with more people. But I remember like 2020 when I first went vegan, like I had a bunch of beliefs that I would now consider like just not evidence-based, and things like that, and have now, I think, are much more justifiable.
What was your most cringe belief?
I wanted to write a book like 2 months into being vegan on why humans are herbivores.
Wow, man, you were really motivated. You were one of the most motivated people I've ever. Like when I was 18, I was like, I just didn't give a shit about anything. I was like a selfish asshole. The idea that you're like thinking strategically about what college to go to, specifically going to a college that is animal ag, like writing a book, that is just like, yeah, that is really, really cool.
Yeah. And I think at one point, like, yeah, just other like weird beliefs that are like not necessary for veganism at all. And once I started learning like propositional logic and got better in sort of the debate community, not even just for veganism, but just in general, I was able to like understand better the entailments of positions. And I found that really helpful. So that was really cool. And I also sort of expanded the communities I'm involved with to sort of see lots of different perspectives and sides, which was really neat. In terms of today, I mean, there are some specific forms of vegan advocacy where I'm dubious are effective. But on the net, because how much of this movement is such a tiny movement of active people, I think even small specific things of types of activism that might do small short-term harm, for the sake of having them people in our movement for long-term, especially young people who are like 20, is worth it to not burn bridges with them.
Yeah, for sure. I think too that the vegan ethics and the environmental and health stuff, I think the science there is pretty like solidified on many of these things. But where we seem to have less empirical evidence is for tactics, and so I think in general, the empirical evidence for any one particular tactic over another is much weaker than these other things. And it also just tends to be in movements, tactical differences are where many of the arguments arise. Another thing too, I just wanted to point out is that it can feel oftentimes like we have these huge differences, when if we kind of step back and take that 30,000 foot view, the differences maybe aren't as big as we think. I just want to put this out there so people understand this is like a normal thing with any sort of social movement or group of activists. These disagreements happen. They tend to happen around tactical issues quite often. And there's actually a psychological phenomenon called like sort of the narcissism of small differences, where these differences will appear very large to the people in the in-group, while potentially not being maybe so large as they think they are.
Yeah.
So
your in-group, out-group video or videos you talked about that was very informative.
Yeah.
I forgot what they were called. They may have been from a bit ago. Yeah, like even in the EA community, which on the spectrum of like animal welfare to like animal abolitionism, I'm much more in the animal abolition spectrum than your average EA folk interested in animals. So instead of when I got to university, not associating with them, I actually sort of became their group, and they taught me a lot, and I learned so much about other EA causes as well, but also was able to sort of push that needle just a little bit at UW-Madison and then abroad too, about the importance of abolition advocacy, both morally and tactically, as a means to making change. And I'd sort of assumed that, EAs are some very smart, data-driven people, and I sort of assumed that they had sort of considered all the options, but a lot of them, they'd only heard of animal welfare. The concept of animal rights, like, had never even occurred to them. And that was so interesting to see. And they were like, whoa, this is so interesting. So that was really cool to see and continue to be part of in the EA community.
Every community has their blind spots, and stuff around veganism is like a blind spot for nearly everyone. It is just so consistently something that well-meaning, empathetic, intelligent people don't think about. I'm like blown away, even when, friends in my friend circle, just like the way they react to the vegan position just blows my mind sometimes. In other words, that they're not more receptive to it. It can definitely be hard. And I know that's something that every vegan struggles with, but like there's some people in my friend group who I'm like, okay, I wouldn't really expect them to be receptive to the vegan message. Like I get it. they're not that kind of person. But I think it's those people who you're like, well, this is like right in your wheelhouse with like your empathy, your consideration, you know, you've got the intelligence level.
Yeah.
And I think those are the ones where it really hits home, and you're like, wow, these blind spots are, you know, you could drive a truck through them. So
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think I asked you pretty much everything that I wanted to ask you about ASAP, about starting a chapter. I think we got some cool stories from you about, you know, your own journey and stuff. If anyone wants to ask any questions, go ahead and just put them in the chat now. If you already asked them, just put them in the chat again, and I'll pop them up. They can be to me, they can be to Ryan, doesn't matter. But yeah, if there's anything we want to answer.
I'm looking through some comments. That's where the questions would be.
Yeah.
And I actually want to read this one. It's not even a question. It's I hate how people put so much focus on college kids and ignore the proletariat. And I think this actually gets at some of sort of left-wing human politics. And I actually really appreciate this comment, because on my university campus and across campuses across the US, due to conflicts going on in the Middle East, there was lots of demonstrations, encampments. That was the big talk of the entire school year, more or less. And things would come in waves of picking up. So regardless of people's specific political views or views on, you know, the Israel-Gaza situation, it was very interesting as a case study seeing animal rights activism that I was doing, my peers were doing, going on at the same time that this other political movement was going on. And how can animal rights activists learn from what things worked for that movement and continue to work from that movement, and what things don't work for that movement and continue to don't work for that movement? How can we leverage that? Because if they're focusing on universities, that gives us much needed information about strategies and data and tactics that we can use so we don't have to make the same mistakes. So just for example, there was an encampment going on at my university for the last few weeks of the semester, and we were doing our cubes each week, weekly at our same location. And we didn't want to change locations because it was a really good location. We came there with some backups, but we wanted to assess the situation, and our area was about 40 feet from the actual encampment where we would set up our cube. So we decided to run it there and see how it happened that night. And we were out for 3 or 4 hours. We typically talk to around 75 people in an hour conversation. I've got about 4 or 5 people who do cubes with me, 1 TV, so 4 outreachers. And we had more traction than normal that night. And a lot of people from the encampment would come talk to us about what we were doing. You're always going to have people, you know, hating or deflecting, especially at a time when there's a lot of tension. We'll get people saying, you know, why don't you speak about X, Y, Z that's going on? Why are you focused on this? But most people are very receptive, and we had more people than normal. And a lot of people there, they consider themselves fighting oppression, fighting evil, fighting injustice on both sides. There was people at the encampment, and there's people anti-protesting or protesting against the encampment as well. And people from both sides were very receptive to what they were doing. You know, we're like, you're paying lip service to oppression if you're oppressing these beings, if you're putting pigs in gas chambers, if you're paying to enslave these animals. And that was really powerful. It was also really powerful for us activists to see. When I started cubes, the people I gathered do cubes, they were very involved in the EA community, like these EA nerds doing rights activism with the mask and the cube. So they were all super nervous and skeptical. And then once they started doing it, they love it. And now they asked to do them, and we're setting them up for them this summer. And it was super cool for them to see that. And I was really proud of them for going out of their comfort zone. We really pushed out of our comfort zone there. Even at one point, there was a police brawl while we were doing the cube. So we had to shut down the 20 minutes. There was cops all sides, allegedly when the protesters smashed a cop car, and then the police ran after them, and a big crowd and a bunch of stuff going on. So we stopped the cube for 20 minutes because nobody was focusing on us anyway. But then right when it finished, we just went right back to normal, and we just continued doing our outreach and had some amazing conversations.
Yeah. The outreach that goes well can be really intoxicating. You just need like 1 or 2 good conversations, and you're like, holy shit, this is so much more powerful than I thought it would be, you know?
And you remember the good ones more than the bad ones.
Yeah.
Typically.
Yeah. Hopefully. Hopefully.
Yeah. Those are really bad. Yeah.
Yeah. The horrible ones. We have a question here from Sean. Can we get a one-pager on how to start an ASAP chapter at a new university, a cheat sheet to allow students to get some or most of the way there, short of requiring a call? Does anything like that exist currently?
Yeah, not of like a specific cheat sheet. And I would say the biggest first step, if you actually want to get like an ASAP chapter in terms of you got the brand, we send you tables, we send you the cards, we come to university, all that would require, at least my understanding, like a call and getting set up and getting affiliated. We start your social media account and all that. But if you want to start doing things that ASAP does, like buying you and your students a TV and doing cubes, or just doing activism at your university, I would encourage you to check out ASAP social media pages on Instagram, see all the different stuff we're doing semester, and just do that. And but I would definitely encourage you to contact us, get a call, talk about ways that we can help you, even if you're not being your own ASAP chapter. Like we even help other universities that students that don't have a need or want to start their own ASAP chapter, but we can still help them. But in terms of like a one pager, the big things would be look at what animal activism is like already on your campus. See how close you want to follow that ASAP model or be an ASAP chapter, and then figure out how can I be a registered student organization? How do I start making email lists so I know what students can actually help out with this? What does the vegan scene look like? If you want to get a good grasp on things. Yeah.
How do you make an email list? That's something I have no idea, because you said that earlier, like targeting the right students. I'm like, I don't even know where to begin with that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you're a registered student organization, there's often a school fair. So all the clubs can make out a poster at a big event in the beginning of the fall semester, or the winter semester, or the quarter. And people walk by and you've got your fancy sign that says, animal rights, and all the animal rights people will go there and you'll sign up and have good conversations. One is just through sort of word of mouth and seeing people on the street. Others with posters. If you have a QR code on your poster, like we had veganism as a moral urgency posters with a QR code, and then you sign up, you give them your email, and now you're on our email list, so you hear about all of our events. If you ever have people come to an intro event, have everybody sign up there. One thing, if we get a really receptive person for a cube, who either is vegan or wants to go vegan or just wants to get involved, we have them fill out the form right then and there at the cube. Instead of having them just take a picture of the QR code, because then they might forget or not do it, we actually have them fill it out there. Another thing is, if you're a public university, at least in theory, you should have access to a database with all the students and their emails. And that can be helpful for sort of targeting emails if you want to email, all the freshman food science majors or that sort of thing. It may be a very challenging, like, bureaucratic process to get that. We had to do like a lot of asking, and I wasn't the specific person involved to getting that. One of my EA buddies was, but I believe all public universities, they do have to disclose the students that go there and their contact information. But take that with a grain of salt.
I'm sure that would be different everywhere. Yeah, I think that because you could just like email everyone, but I think the thing there is like stratifying it and getting some sort of information that's relevant, like you said, like food science or environmental science majors or something. Like, how do you get that basically? Yeah. So that's something you can do. Though. You can go and ask them.
Oh, what was that?
But no, I mean, just like, even if it's difficult to do, that's just like something you can do. So just knowing that is like a strategy is good.
Yeah, at least just like look into it. Yeah. Yeah. Also, like, even mass emails that don't target are also great. I mean, there's plenty of vegans doing majors that don't at least intuitively align with like changing the food system. There's lots to do. One other small thing I want to mention is UW-Madison is a big like animal testing campus. So it's been cool leveraging the more public support against that for people who aren't already vegan, and using that as a gateway into veganism and to actually help the animals on campus who are being tested on. So that's been really great to see. Like, I'll have people come up to me on the street who sort of know me on the animal guy on campus, be like, hey, I want to get involved. I don't even want to go on your email list because I'm an animal science major and I don't want to even be known that I'm involved in these animal advocacy groups. How can I still hear about things? So I'll just like get their number and I'll text them about stuff. So it's very interesting seeing that. Yeah.
That's really interesting. That's really interesting.
It might be unique sort of to like a big agriculture, like school, like animal agriculture school. But yeah.
That just goes to show how much social pressure really matters here. We often talk about convenience and price and taste, but social pressure and societal expectations, I think, are definitely something we should talk about more. I think they're potentially the more powerful tool. what are the most surprising disagreements you found in vegan infighting?
Probably having to do with definitions of veganism, because that sort of frames how we talk about veganism, what things are vegan or not vegan. And I found people who want to keep a similar definition to when veganism was sort of coined, decades ago. And I think it's okay for definitions to evolve. I find it surprising that people don't necessarily feel that, but it's okay to have disagreements. Another thing that surprised me is vegans who are not pro certain alternatives like cultivated meat. I even had a debate on this on Carnism Debunk's channel. That surprises me. It seems that although it's by no means a perfect solution or vegan yet, in a lot of cases, if it can be shown to massively reduce the risk of billions of animals going through the unimaginable, I mean, that to me is very abolitionist to be for that as a technological solution. So I'm very advocating for alt proteins and cultivated meat. I help run alternative protein organizations on campus as well, and I'm interested in that also maybe as a career option. So that I thought was surprising to see. It seems like it goes against intuitions if you want to help animals to be against a solution or a potential solution that has the ability to massively help animals.
Okay, we got one from someone I've never heard of here. What gets you out of bed every day? Where does the sense of urgency come from? And how can your viewers be inspired to get active? Question for both of you. You want to go first?
Sure. In late middle school, early high school, I was like super into World War II history. Like I read a bunch of books and documentaries. I even made a World War II museum in my room. I took these old doors that used to be connected to my room and hung them up and did posters and got all these planes and all these different things. And I was super interested in that history. And part of that, especially growing up Jewish as well, going to temple, I also learned about the Holocaust and all that sort of thing. And when I went vegan, and to backtrack a little bit, I felt like, man, if I was alive at this time, what would I be doing? If I was in Europe, if I was whatever, what would things look like? And when I went vegan, soon after, I got introduced to Holocaust survivors like Alex Hershaft, the plight of animals in comparison to that specific human injustice. And it really hit deep to me. And I was like, this is what I'm here to fight against. When we look at oppression, we often think, how are other people oppressing us? But we don't think, how are we oppressing others? Mm-hmm. And that really struck something. So one thing that I've done recently in sort of quite literally getting out of bed is I'll look at the Faunalytics slaughter showing the slaughter count of animals for food per year, which, shows that, it's rising and rising and rising. It's in the 100 billion or what, if you don't include fish and marine life. And just seeing that, every second that this goes on is thousands of more animals dying. Every day, every year, this sits delayed is more and more and more. So that urgency really propels me to make change.
Yeah. So I think, when I think about this, the numbers obviously can make a very strong cognitive intellectual case. But I will say that they didn't exactly move me, right? Like I understood that this is bad, and I understood that this is very bad just based on the numbers. But much like you, I really do think analogies are what tap into that, like that motivation, that emotion, so the word emotion has motion in it, like what drives you, like for us as what gets you out of bed. And so I think you need that emotional pull to really pull you out of bed, to get you out there, to get you active, or at least I do. And I'm even someone who's very quantitative. I love numbers. But even for me, those analogies are incredibly powerful. I was also very moved by both the Holocaust analogy and also slavery analogies. Particularly, if you look back and look at the excuses that people gave for chattel slavery, specifically in the US, those excuses mirror so closely the excuses people give for not being vegan that it is just like absolutely stunning, and knowing that we could be so wrong, and knowing that we are so wrong now, that most people are so wrong, I think is the thing that really motivates me, because I think what it is that it's so obvious that what we're doing is wrong and that it's incredibly wrong. And people fight it so hard. Like I said earlier, empathetic, intelligent people are just, it's not clicking for them.
Yeah.
And to me, that makes this incredibly urgent, because I feel it makes it urgent, but it also makes it like, it feels like they're just like an inch away from getting it. You know, it just feels like these people are so close that I just need to give them the tiniest push.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of what gets me out of bed. On a more selfish note, I am genuinely really concerned about climate change. And, you know, from a purely selfish standpoint, even if we were to stop all emissions tomorrow, there's some models that show that we still would hit our 1.5 target by the end of the century, maybe even go over the 2-degree target if we don't do anything about animal agriculture.
Yeah.
And then, of course, I'm also worried about pandemics and things like that. So like, there's just like,
yeah,
it touches on so many things. It's like, I don't see how you can't be motivated to at least say something about this, you know?
Yeah. And I think a lot of it also in terms of personality traits that we're sort of born with, or the environment that we're in as well. And some things are out of our control. Like even in the EA community, like I was already red pilled on like, or black pilled, I forgot what the right term is, but like on all the animal suffering stuff. But then I learned about all these existential risks, like not just climate change and pandemics and antibiotic resistance, but you know, how fragile nuclear war is, or artificial intelligence risk. And now it's like, whoa. But I think, you know, I'm naturally more optimistic, but also surrounding yourself with serious people who want to change the world, I think is really helpful.
For sure.
Additionally, seeing those animals as individuals, when I was, you know, watching Dominion, when I first, you know, went vegan, and Gary Yourofsky's speech and things like that, like seeing every one of those animals, imagine what it was like to be them, being their head, being that farrowing crate, all these different things. It was like, now magnify that by trillions. It's like that really hit hard. Yeah.
All right. We actually got some more questions coming in here. Go. How can we get all vegan dining halls on college campuses? As far as I know, the Mean Greens at the University of North Texas in Denton since 2011 is still the only one in the USA, alas. I guess that question's for you.
Yeah. My understanding is you need to have enough public support where the dining hall can support a all vegan dining hall, or dining hall that's more plant-based, without wasting money on food that's not going to get eaten. So you need to show public support for it through signatories, through things like that. And then you actually have to show people are, over consistently enough long period of time, actually going to eat that. And I think the B is actually that the second step's easier, because people sort of eat what's in front of them. Vegan food's good. So typically, you know, if it's there, people are going to eat at the dining hall who are going to eat at the dining hall anyway. Though I don't know a ton about this specifically, so I definitely encourage you to check out plant-based universities. I know they're doing a lot of good stuff in England and other places as well. So I would check out that for more specifics. But definitely gaining public support, you know, and it doesn't have to be just from vegans. You know, you need the support of hundreds and thousands of students and faculty from non-vegans as well on the campuses. Also, I think, you know, from like a long-term careers perspective, if you go on to become, as a vegan, the head of a university, or someone with a lot of position of power, the head of a department, you can help influence those decisions with a really big impact. Yeah.
Awesome. What does ASAP do over the summer?
Yeah, great question. You're looking at it. Doing more sort of outreach and preparing for the fall. So gaining more universities to be new ASAP chapters. We want to train the student leaders from all the different chapters, like myself. How do you best speak out for animals at Cubes? How can you logistically support your ASAP chapter? Right now we're figuring out new posters that we want to do for next semester. So when there's no school in session, we're really preparing for other things. So our main time is during the school. That's when we're all the engines are running.
Awesome. This isn't a question. Sean really wants that one pager, though. He said all the tips that you're giving right now would look amazing on a one pager.
Yeah, I would agree. That's something that I'll talk to some of my ASAP people about. Shouldn't be too hard to do.
Let's see. Here's a softball for you. Where do you get your protein? What is your preferred protein source?
One meal that I really like that I've probably had hundreds of times by now is I've always liked pasta growing up, but just like a big bowl of pasta with tomato sauce and then like adding vegan chicken to it and just like mixing it all together, I found is really good. But like all food, like I eat lots of beans and lentils and peas and nuts and tofu and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, all the normal stuff.
Jack probably knows.
We got one more here. What I hear about this is I can't change the system or save these animals, so why would I change? How do we counter this when a young person says it?
Yeah, it's a great question. As you know, the system is ultimately just the sum of us as individuals. All the decisions we make, all the prioritizations we make for helping ourselves versus helping our communities, our groups. And so if we can influence enough individuals and yourself as an individual, that changes the system in the long term. So that's something that I'll say to people and say, you have a voice. So, if you're eating 100 to 200 animals a year before you're a vegan, sort of on average, that's an amazing thing to not have to pay for that anymore. And, it's a moral baseline. I would more consider it that, not paying for animals to be killed it's an obligation, and it's not that you're doing good. You're just no longer doing bad. That's how I would frame it. But the point is you are still making a change. In terms of bigger impact on a system, you can be a voice and actually make a change for these animals, especially on a university campus. You're making these small communities of animal rights. That's how almost all of these revolutionary movements happened. Civil rights movement, for example. So I would really install their belief in them. One person I was having a conversation with after dog meat, and they were senior. This was like, they're graduated now, so this was earlier this semester. And they said, some point in the conversation, I forgot how it got brought up, but they're like, after college, I'm just going to bunker down and get good money from a job and just live a relaxing life. But I don't want to, help the world. The world's a mess. The world's going to shit. I can't do anything. And, I like tried to awaken in them, like, what choice do we have? Are we just going to watch it all burn down around me, or are we going to go out with a bang or, make this work? And he also went to Froz's talk that night. And I think that definitely inspired him a little bit to whatever he ends up doing to really strive at it and give it his best shot.
I know. I think that's something that's really hard for me to relate to, is just like laying down and dying. It's being like, well, there's nothing we can do. Like, I'll just fucking give up and do nothing. It's very strange. I think too, like, this is why, again, like having the dining hall thing in your back pocket here is great, because you can be like, this is literally a systemic change that we're pushing for on this campus right now. This is like a concrete material thing that is going to matter in your community. Yeah. Like more rhetorically too, I sometimes will just kind of point out to people, like, people say like, well, if I can't save all the animals, why would I do this? And it's like, what do you think about oncologists? Like, should oncologists exist? Because like, if a single oncologist isn't going to cure all the cancer in the world, but certainly they will cure some cancer. And so like, it seems to be, to me, this like asymmetrical standard that we apply in this scenario because we don't want to do something, like, I don't think anyone ever says that whenever like, or, anyone, a firefighter, a police officer, whatever, no one's going to be like, cause they can't save everyone, then I shouldn't do anything, or they shouldn't be doing it at all. So,
I mean, think about like this, like what would people do to save a life of someone who's like hurting or dying in front of them or just drowning? Not being vegan and speaking up specifically. I mean, if you think about the individual animals' lives that no longer have to be exploited their life and be killed, go through some measurable suffering, like that's a life worth living right there. If you just save one pig from going through that miserable experience, I mean, some people work their entire lives for the heroics of saving one person, and it's amazing, and they should be congratulated for that. But what we can do for these animals is so huge.
I mean, I've said this before too, like if you were to save a dog from a burning building, like tomorrow someone saved a dog from a burning building, you would remember that forever. It would be among one of the most cherished memories, I imagine, of most people's entire lives. That heroic moment, that feeling of accomplishment, the feeling of like saving someone, And yet when it comes, as long as that victim is outside of your eye line, it just doesn't hit the same way. And so, yeah, definitely trying to get people to connect with that, I think is really important.
And sometimes you don't see your own impact. If you're out on the hallway at school and you hang up a poster, you write a message quickly as you leave class on the board after everybody's left saying, pigs are killed in gas chambers, live vegan, or something like that. You don't know what type of impact that will have. Maybe if that person won't go vegan, but that they'll too uncomfortable to eat bacon today at lunch, you just saved an animal, or not a total animal, but some meaningful fraction. Yeah.
It's funny you say that, because one of the first memories I have that was like vegan adjacent was that we were walking. I think we were in some foreign city. I think we were on vacation, and I saw a sidewalk chalk that just said like, a pig is about as smart as a 3-year-old, and that's literally all it said. It didn't say It didn't say like go vegan. It didn't say anything else, and that stuck with me for so long. Even just reading it, me and my girlfriend stopped eating pig for like at least weeks or months at that point. Now, of course, it came back. We didn't have the philosophical foundation or whatever.
And you weren't surrounded by more messages, I assume.
Exactly. Right. We weren't getting that like repeated hit of messages,
Right.
And so, even just that, like just how many animals were saved just from that like 2 seconds of writing chalk that I saw, And also, these are the downstream effects too. Like that clearly has been rattling around in my head. And to say that didn't have an effect on me ultimately going vegan, I think would be, I just think that is absurd, honestly, because that definitely has been rattling around in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like, you have ripple effects too, that just are like, as we're saying, are just not going to be immediately obvious. So someone, Lithium Dragon, $20. Wow. Thank you, Lithium Dragon. All right. You definitely have to answer this one. What's an approach to encourage a chapter to be started in a university as someone no longer in the university? I assume not rolling up to college students in a white van offering gelatin-free, bone char-free candy.
What's
so like as a non-student, how do you start to encourage like a college around you to start a chapter?
Yeah, assuming like you're near the college, if you still have connections at the university, get in contact with the students there who are in animal rights to use some of these ASAP approaches or start an ASAP chapter. Additionally, finding ways to connect those students or even students even just somewhat interested in animals to other people in the community so you can talk to them and gain connections and hear from other activists. I think it's good. In terms of an approach to encourage that chapter to be started sort of from scratch if there's no animal stuff going on and you're not a student. What I would do, and this is a little bit bold, but I would actually reach out to faculty who are maybe more likely statistically to be vegan, faculty department, environmental department, and ask, hey, do you know anybody interested in animal advocacy? Or would you be interested in being a faculty advisor for this? Or what's the animal advocacy like on campus? Is there anything going on? Do you want to be involved with this? Definitely reach out to people. People are happy to often do things for others, for things that they're interested in. People like feeling important. People like getting something to do. So I wouldn't be afraid to go up to that. But also, if you're comfortable, you can also just like do outreach at the university not as a student. Just set up your table outside and have discussions about veganism, and you'll run into people sooner rather than later.
Awesome, good answer. Let's see. What have you tried to get funding from outside animal welfare funding sources? And does ASAP need much funding?
I'm not sure what you mean by try to get funding from outside like animal welfare. In terms of like funding, we get a lot of our funding from personal donations. And I know ASAP, definitely needs all the money we can get. And the reason for that is we need to be able to support the students with materials and supplies, but also importantly, actually pay people to do this outreach, come to campuses. For example, we want somebody to go out east in the out east area in terms of all those schools that are really close to each other in Boston, MIT, Harvard, Babson College, things like that. They actually have somebody there on the ground to do ASAP work and get things moving really quickly. So we have to compensate those people so they can live and support themselves. So ASAP doesn't want to get all the money that they can get. And every donation is really, really appreciated. It goes a long way. We're really trying to build systemic change here. We're investing into the future. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, I think that might be all the questions, unless I missed. Oh wait, hold on. What do you think about orgs like the RSPCA?
Is that the like British, um,
I
like
believe so.
humane certified sort of?
I believe so. I believe so.
I mean, from what I've seen, it may have small, tiny bits of impact on terms of how much animals suffer in farms, but does little to nothing. It even could do worse in terms of perpetuating the idea that animals are here for us to use and eat. And I think it's a big barrier, and it's very harmful. Orgs like, I mean, terms like that, labels like that, they often are. And this goes for organic animal products, free range, humane certified, grass fed. They are meant to make the consumer feel better about their choices, but do little to nothing for the animals. If you were the animal involved with that and you got another inch of space, or you were stunned slightly differently, your life is still taken from you. If this was in a human context, we wouldn't feel comfortable with it. It'd still be murder. It would still be wrong. And unless we can think of a justifiable difference, which I can't, then it doesn't make much sense to me. So yeah.
Awesome. I think we got one more, and then we'll end the stream. That's okay with you. Besides dog meat, what's the most impactful live exhibit you found? And then also maybe, do you think dog meat is an effective live exhibit?
I definitely think dog meat can be effective. I've seen, like, again, it's not something that I don't think I would have been impacted by it that much when I was not vegan, but for some people it really does. Some people it really hits them. I personally love cubes. My bias is I like doing them, which might make me think they're more effective than they are, but I think they are really effective. They're sort of bread and butter of what we do as outreach, at least at UW-Madison, and we want to keep it that way and keep doing them all the time, weekly, as many times as possible at all these different locations, because it's so basic in the fact that these people understand that what they're causing is animal abuse when we explain that to them, and that they're against animal abuse, and that the only way to live consistently with their own values is to not pay for that anymore. We found that really effective. It's holding them accountable and making them understand, and it's a very honest conversation. So I personally find cubes to be really, really effective. In any conversation you're having where you're focusing the conversation on what they can do about it and the moral urgency of what they need to do about it in conjunction with footage so they can see the reality of it, I think that's really effective. To me, that's my favorite.
Yeah, the argument with the emotional punch, I think,
Yeah.
is definitely a really powerful combination. I totally agree there. There is actually one more question that someone asked that I do want you to address, because actually multiple people have asked me this on Instagram. And that is, can ASAP operate in the UK, or does ASAP have any plans to operate in the UK? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, we can operate anywhere. It just depends on how quickly we can scale up. We want to be in the top universities, and as much universities as possible. We view universities as where we can make the most change. So in years down the line, if we have enough staff and funding and we're growing and we're growing and growing, we'd love to be in as many places as possible. That's my current understanding. Though I would take what I say with that just a little bit of a grain of salt, because I'm just a student organizer. So if you want like an official answer to that, I would ask somebody like Dr. Faraz Horsini. But they certainly can. In terms of actual plans, we're in 15 or 16 universities right now, adding a couple more this fall. And those are all in the US with the exception of one in the Netherlands. I know there's interest growing in India for stuff as well, but I would definitely be on the lookout for that. And if you're interested in starting something in another country outside the US, Dr. Faraz Orsini says, yeah, we're starting the process of starting one in School of London of economics, so it's not official yet. So that's cool to hear. I also know there's talk of the reason why it's difficult to do them logistically in places outside the US, or even places in the US that are far apart, is for the ASAP team to travel. So if we can get a bunch of schools in the Midwest that are just a drive away, or in the Boston area that are close by, it's way easier to do that than having a support group travel overseas. So I know Faraz has also talked to me about doing like mentorship universities. We're still supported by ASAP, but might not get the traveling group yet. But that's cool to see that they're in the process for one in the UK.
Yeah. And are you cool if people like would message you on Instagram to ask you any further questions that they have?
Absolutely. That's exactly what I'm here for. You can find me at ryan.blum11. So ROYAN.BLUM 11 on Instagram. And you can just, hit me up and I'd be happy to chat or help about anything animal related.
Awesome. And I'm not even going to ask Faraz. I'm just going to say if you want to message him on Instagram as well. He's there as Dr. Faraz Harsini. And I also have pinned in the chat Allied Scholars for Animal Protection website. If you want to go there and read about anything, if you want to donate to them, there's a big blue donate button right as you click on that. So check that out. Send Ryan any questions you have. Send Dr. Faraz any questions you have. They're very happy to help. That's how you get the conversation started. That's how you get the ball rolling, is just talking. And if it's a good fit, I'm sure you'll be able to figure it out from there. Ryan, thanks so much for coming on. I thought this was a really informative conversation. I hope the audience thought it was as informative as I did. And hopefully we'll be in contact.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I look forward to eventually meeting you in person and doing some outreach together. Thanks so much for having me on.
For sure. All right. Bye, everyone.